I'm here with Rachel Down. She is the owner of Boil and Broth here in the UK. She has a sought-after family-run business selling bone broth and other digestive aids, fermented foods, things like that. And the reason why I wanted to bring her on today was to talk about just that. So just to give you a backstory on she is someone that suffered with a few health problems, Candida Overgrowth, and she found that within 12 weeks of implementing the changes that she needed to make, she was able to reverse her condition. She also lost something like 6 stone of excess weight in the course of about 2 years. So she's really, she's really done her homework and really sorted herself out, which is really inspiring to see. So my first question today for Rachel is basically give me a back view on different supplements, diet or remedies that you've used over the years, and maybe what you found most or least useful.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks so much for having me on today. It's really great to have the opportunity to talk to you more and all those that listen to you, just about our business and also about, gut health and why it's so vital for everybody, as I've experienced on my own health journey. So before I discovered gut health, you're quite right. I did used to dabble in all sorts of supplements and trying to do different things. Low carb diets, which don't get me wrong, I'm a big champion of. But I think in nutrition it can be quite confusing, and you don't really know what a carbohydrate is and all that sort of thing. So when you don't have a lack of information, it's quite difficult to know what you can eat. So yeah, I tried lots of different things, Atkins diets, and sometimes I had results from them. But I think it was a really big shock for me when I had Candida Overgrowth, because it sort of developed from being pregnant and antibiotics and other things. So I didn't really know what to do with it. It was like, for me, it was a medical condition and I needed medical support for that. So yeah, aside from supplements and all those sorts of things, I was also caught in a bit of a pharmaceutical trap of where I was trying things to get rid of this Candida Overgrowth, which is actually really, really difficult to get hold of. To get rid of. So yeah, I tried a whole load of different things. Fluconazole was, the go-to medicine from the pharmacists, from the GPs, and then just a load of other things like antifungal treatments. For myself, I tried garlic, honey, all the different things. It was just an awful time. It was 3 years of my life battling, trying to get to the bottom of what was going on, really. And prior to that, I'd been wrapped up in protein shakes before for a long time, and energy boosting things, got caught in all these, marketing supplement triangle things. And really, it was only when I discovered gut health that I started to see the truth of the science behind why it's so vital for us.
Brilliant. Yeah, just looking at you now, you look so much better than you did in the past. Like your face is more fuller, like you've got more collagen. You're not full as in fat, but like you look healthier, like more well.
Yeah, thank you, incredible. Jonathan. That's nice. Yeah, and my hair, honestly, I always had really short hair. I've always struggled to grow it. But ever since I've got onto the broth, things like my fingernails are stronger, my hair. You're absolutely right. My skin, I'm 43 next week. And, I think I'm doing pretty good in terms of health, and I absolutely champion that back to gut health.
Yeah, it's so inspiring to see. And I can always tell from what I see on your social media, you're passionate about what you do. Like a lot of people, they'll produce a product but not stand behind it, But I can tell you really push it. You're proud of what you made, which is great.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask a bit about bone broth. So how might it be useful to someone's diet?
That's a great question. Look, I had no idea about broth until I started to do research about what it was and really how to make it. It is, the thing with broth is it's an old age Jewish tradition of cooking bones over a long period of time, boiling bones, and there's a stock and there's a broth. So most people get a bit confused. Like, stock is literally just vegetables, boil your chicken carcass or whatever else, your bones or whatever, for a short period of time, might be a couple of hours, you might sip it, add it to soups or whatever. But broth is a hardcore gut health product, especially the way that we make it, because I've got a science background now. So since I sort of discovered broth and reversed my health condition, it just was like, wow, you know, I need to learn more about this sort of stuff. So I studied a Bachelor of Science, in health science. And I've really got into understanding what it is good in broth, and it's the proteins without a doubt. And so, you know, people add, you know, vegetable broth, and I laugh because I think, well, what real benefit is that? That's not a broth, because a broth, it's the proteins, the minerals, the nutrients that are in the broth that's vital for gut health, and you only get those proteins from bones. And it's a mineral cooking is a powerful mineral extraction from the bones. It also helps to retain the nutrients over a longer period of time when you're cooking for such a long time. We don't cook for the full 24 to 36 hours like a lot of the other slow cooking bone broth companies. I don't believe in that. You can, it's much more energy efficient to use pressure cookers. And there's secrets, but the reason the broth is so good is because the bones that we put in. So we only source local grass-fed bones. We can't stand by that they're organic, but we only source the bones from high quality butchers and farmers in Britain, because the British farming is by far one of the best farmings in the world. And for that very reason, we make an awesome broth. So through the mineral extraction, when people have the broth, they have a broth that contains like loads of proteins, collagen being one of them. Now, collagen is a vital protein complex. It's really good for, as we've both just discussed, about skin, nails, hair. But proteins in the broth are also excellent for inflammation reduction. And I think that's probably one of the most important messages I can get out about bone broth is inflammation reduction. Because when people have inflammation in their body, it leads to disease. So what happens over time, and this is what from my own experience, from having antibiotics, having a high sugar diet when I was pregnant, all those things irritated my gut, and I wasn't exercising as much. I was pregnant, and obviously my body, it didn't do well during pregnancy, but as a result, I gained inflammation in the digestive system. Now, when you have inflammation in the digestive system, it actually affects the cells. So the cells become damaged, and as a result, your body cannot digest food properly. So what happens is you actually almost, in a way, if you don't treat it, you can become malnourished in a way over time, because you're not absorbing the correct nutrients and vital minerals that are in the foods that you're eating. A lot of it will just get passed out, in your from your feces or in your urine, or it will get stored as fat. So helping to have, including broth in your diet, can actually help to aid your digestion. So it reduces the inflammation. So that makes then the cells function better, makes the digestive enzymes function better. And then as a result, your body can start absorbing those vital nutrients again properly. So that's why people tend to see weight loss as well when they first have bone broth in their diet, is because their body is just functioning better. Their digestive system is breaking down the food properly, and it's being absorbed better. So yeah, that's my secret. And just in terms of, having bone broth and when to have it. So broth is particularly good in the morning. So if you have stomach troubles, like inflammation of the gut, or if you've IBS, or you've just, anything, diverticulitis, all those sorts of conditions, that gut health conditions, then I would be highly recommending you to have a cup of bone broth in the morning before you do anything else. So when people go to bed, their body is fasting. So that's why we have breakfast. You're breaking the fast. So in the morning, if you break your fast with bone broth, you're more likely to settle your digestive system. And also, because it's so high in protein, particularly ours, you're filling up your body so that you don't need another meal for a short while. I always believe that if you wake up in the morning and you have like a rich a rich breakfast in carbohydrates, then a few hours later you're going to be craving those carbohydrates and those sugars more. So have a higher protein breakfast, you know, with the broth, and then a couple of hours later have more of a protein fat breakfast.
Yeah, that's great advice, honestly. I mean, I'm noticing a lot of my clients that many have some gastric distress. It might not necessarily be bone broth that they're having to sort of settle it, but omitting lots of things from the diet and reducing all the inflammatory foods really does make a big difference. And I think bone broth, like the one that you sell, would really add to that sort of, it's a food, but it's also a supplement, so it really benefit in quite a lot of different ways. So really useful tool. The next question I had was about the fermented foods. So I believe you sell water kefir on your site. So what can you tell me about that?
So again, I started the fermenting journey just out of my Candida overgrowth problem. So the more I was researching about what Candida was, the more I started to think, well, there's got to be more natural solutions than just going to the doctors and, you know, or buying like really high, really expensive probiotics. And at the time, you know, my husband and I, we've just had 2 small children. I wasn't working, you know, we didn't have a great deal of money. So it wasn't as if I could just all of a sudden go and start spending all this money on supplements and bone broth and all these things. So that's why I was like, no, I've got to make it. So with Candida overgrowth in particular, it generally comes back to a microbe problem. So in your gut, you have a gut microbiome, and over time, the biome can actually become impacted by having, things like antibiotics. So antibiotics are a real problem in the medicine space because they do cause problems within your gut bacteria. And if you're having multiple doses of antibiotics and then you're not supplementing with probiotics, you're literally just stripping out, you know, a lot of the good bacteria from your gut, because unfortunately antibiotics don't have intelligence where they say, well, you're a friendly bacteria, I'm not going to kill you, I'm going to go and kill those bad guys instead. So, you know, it just sees bacteria and it will just reduce bacteria colonies, and there's certain bacteria colonies that do get affected when you're having antibiotics, and things like the lactobacillus range and the bifidobacterium range, you know, they're the ones that do always get depleted, but they have such a vital role not only in your immune system but also in the healthy functioning of your gut. And they also help to keep things like harmful yeasts from growing out of control, and that's essentially what Candida overgrowth is. It's a yeast, it's an intrusive yeast, and it like any living organism, it just wants to grow and feed and expand its life, you know. So to get it, this is why it's such a difficult condition to get rid of, because it just wants to grow. And if you develop something like leaky gut, then the yeast roots can actually hook into the gut lining and then start to infiltrate the bloodstream. And then once it's in the blood, the yeast can then be carried to other parts of the body. It's a similar thing to cancer in those ways. As soon as it comes out of the cell membrane and into the bloodstream, it can metastasize and go to other locations. So fungi is very similar in that respect. So I sort of got my science head on to think, well, if there's these nasty bacterias and yeasts growing in my body, how do I build up the good guys, you know? And that's when the probiotics came in. But probiotics can be really expensive, and you have trillions of gut bacteria. So when you're having probiotics, you really need to be having a high strength probiotic to actually make any difference at all. So I was buying the expensive supplements. It was okay for a while, but so I can't continue to do this. And I wanted to find a natural source. And all of a sudden, the fermented world just opened up to me. And I started to discover about kefir. And I looked at kefir, milk kefir, and I wasn't having dairy at the time, because dairy is a problem in the gut. Like, a lot of people still have quite high in dairy foods, but as a result you can have inflammation of it, and it's not because dairy is bad for you, it's because of the process that dairy goes through to get it to being the place it is. So if you're having raw milk, for example, that's an okay milk dairy product to have. But once it goes through the process of pasteurization and all that sort of stuff and heat treatment, you know, you're losing vital proteins, vital sugars in there that actually your body needs to help to break it down. Sorry if I'm getting really technical.
That's
But,
perfect.
okay, cool. Anyway, so the water. So aside from the milk kefir, I discovered water kefir, and I thought, well, actually, that is a better solution, because when you ferment with sugar, but you don't have sugar left in the final product. I think this is really important. And this is where the magic of fermentation comes in, because actually what happens is the bacteria from the starter, which in the instance of kefir water is the kefir grains, that's the starter culture, there's bacteria in there, that actually breaks down the sugars. So, and as a result, sugar is made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So as a result, the drink becomes carbon dioxide, because it's broken down the sugars. So it produces a gas as a result, and that's why it's fizzy. And that's why you might find that some things like milk kefir as well is also fizzy. It's got a tangy taste, but that's because it's fermenting in its own sugars. So yeah, just having, you know, and the thing is with kefir water is you actually don't need very much of it. Like, you know, I met this lady once and she was drinking liters of the stuff a day. But your body really doesn't need that much. You know, you can get away with a small glass of kefir water. As long as you're doing it every day, you're topping up your daily bacteria, you're keeping it at balance. And I think that, you know, one of the really important things to learn about fermented foods is that fermented foods have been around for such a long time. You know, the first mention of them is, that, believe it or not, is actually in the Bible, you know, where it goes back, and we're told then that that's what the Israelites were doing back in that time. They were fermenting foods, they were fermenting alcohol. And actually, you know, so those things have been with us for such a long time. And it's only been in the last 100 years that, since we've introduced things like refrigeration, that, you know, we've lost that connection with cooking and preserving foods in these ways.
Yeah, that's incredible, really. Like, people might watch this and think, oh, these foods don't really apply to me. It's not, you know, we've done fine without it. No, we haven't done fine without these foods. You know, I think a diet with perhaps some raw, some cooked, some fermented foods is probably going to be optimal, with varying degrees between different individuals. But it's incredible that this can make such a difference. I mean, I wanted to ask as well about the process of creating kefir. So I make my own, so I already know. But how
cool.
might someone from home do it?
So what with kefir, so kefir water, it's very simple. You know, all you need to do is get hold of some kefir grains. But, you know, just make sure that you're buying them from a fairly decent source. So I actually started out with 120 grams, which isn't very much, from a seller on eBay. And and they grow. They just grow themselves. It's such an amazing, like, it's a really fun project to get into at home. If you're not doing much, then, you know, it's a great science project to get into. And I homeschool the kids as well, so actually it's really good fun to explain to them what's going on. But you literally just get the kefir grains, add water and add sugar in, like, you know, just a quart jar, something like that. I ferment anaerobic, so I make sure that there is oxygen getting into the jars. A lot of people do it. The other way around. So a lot of people do it anaerobic. I do it aerobic, so there's oxygen in the jars. And I find that that's a good way to do it. You only need to leave it in a room temperature of about 20 degrees for 24 hours. And then you strain all the grains out, pour it into a bottle and let it go through like a second ferment. So at that second ferment point, you might add juices, you might add fruits, all that sort of stuff, just to flavour it up a little bit. And then, a couple of days later, it's good to go. you can keep it in your fridge. I'd advise to keep kefir water in the fridge because we have had a few explosions. But that's only because you have to remember the science. I think, it can be quite complicated for people to understand, but this fermented foods will keep fermenting. It will keep breaking down those sugars. The bacteria will keep breaking down the sugars. And as it's breaking down those sugars, it's breaking it down, and more carbon dioxide is forming. That's why you often see these, bottles exploding and stuff.
Yeah, that used to happen where I used to work. These like kimchi jars, some children would like slightly open a jar in the fridge. I'm like, oh, you just explosions all the time. You're like, wow.
No.
It'll all like, fizz out and stuff. It's quite incredible, something like that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was like what your plans are for the future. So right now, I mean, I went to the shop recently to buy some pet food, and I saw your stuff in that shop, and I was quite impressed.
Oh,
But yeah,
thank you.
I mean, it's nice to see, because I've known you for quite a few years now. It's nice to see how your business has progressed. She really did start from like grassroots, delivering locally, sort of thing. Yeah.
Honestly, Jonathan, I started with one slow cooker in the kitchen, and I was just making broth soup because I tried making bone broth at the beginning, and I drunk it with all the fat and stuff, and it was just disgusting, and it put me off for a long time. So obviously I learned how to make it properly from then onwards, but then I would just add it with vegetables and make a soup. So I started off selling the broth soup to friends and family. They just kept coming back. I had more people coming, and because I'd lost so much weight as well, I just naturally had gone into business. And then over the years, I've had my children at home, I've homeschooled my children, I've been studying as well. So, it's been quite an slow organic growth for us. I mean, although it is coming up to 5 years, I've done quite well over the 5 years. But we became the first, so seeing the issues within the health industry and how, there is a roundabout of, drugs, inflammation, symptoms, I call it the medical system roundabout. There is this major issue in health, but it's very similar in the pet space as well. So the pet space is pretty much the same, where you've got vets, that are also caught in the same trap, where symptoms, drugs, inflammation, symptoms, drugs, inflammation. And for me, I was like, well, bone broth has to be good for dogs because it's such, they've been feeding off of raw food, and and I remember back in the 80s, they used to do a marrowbone jelly with the food, pet food and stuff, and I thought, let's get a pet food license. So Boil and Broth became the first company in the UK to hold a pet food license and a dual pet food license, and a human license to produce bone broth for selling in the human and the pet space. And that was back in 2019. And then just over that time, we've really grown. So last year, us for Bone Broth for Dogs just sort of went crazy. We started to get distributors on board. We really started to sell into shops. And then now I innovated the bone broth because I wanted to, after, I know it sounds crazy, but once the UK left Europe, the Brexit, once UK left Europe, we were no longer able to ship our frozen products into Europe very well because of the delays on the border. And this just frustrated me because I had so many customers in Europe that I was regularly sending to, and I could no longer send to them. So I was like, well, I need to innovate a bone broth to get the product to them. So I decided to go through a process of innovation with the broth to dehydrate it. So dehydration is basically removing all of the water from the bone broth. So you're left with essentially a condensed down bone broth in a powdered form, and then for people they just add water, so they rehydrate it back up again. And so I innovated that last year, and towards the end of last year, and then earlier on this year the product, I just launched it for dogs, and the product went absolutely viral. And as a result, we ended up having to move into a factory. My husband now works for us, and just in those last, probably 18 months, our business has just really expanded. And now, the plan, so going back to your original question, Jonathan, it's a very long roundabout way to get there. The plan for the business is just really to get the word out there about broth. I want to reach more humans, more dogs, not just in the UK, but around the world, because it is such a vital product that people need to have in their diets every day. Like, everyone in the family should be having it. Babies, your grannies, everyone, because it is such a great healing product. So that's my mission. To get it out there more. And actually, because we've had such a big interest with the pet space, we are finding that people are now buying the broth for their pets, but they're also having it themselves. So literally, by opening the door with getting it in for their dogs, their whole family is now starting to benefit from it. And that's what makes me happy.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love your ethos. I love your approach, and I love your passion for this. It's nice to see someone who's, in fact, managed to sort of find a business plan they can implement that actually helps people. Like, very few things actually do that. So I find that incredible. Now, before I wrap this up, Rachel, I wanted to just ask, how can people find you? What's your website? What social media do you have?
Yeah, brilliant. So we have a website. It's a really good website. There's a lot of blog articles on there that I've written myself as well. We've got a full range of products, everything from dehydrated bone broths to frozen bone broths. And it's called boilandbroth.com. So www.boilandbroth.com. And then we're also on Instagram, Facebook. It's just, our handle is @boilandbroth. We have a YouTube as well. I've no idea what the handle is for that. I'm just, because it's been quite insane this year, I'm just recruiting now to get some help in, somebody to start taking over some of the jobs that I run in social media, and hopefully we can just keep working hard to get the message out there to people on all different platforms of how they can benefit from broth. Yeah. And some recipes too.
Yes, brilliant. So what I'll do is I'll plug all those in the show notes below. People can then find you that way. And so just say bye to everyone, and thanks guys for watching.
Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.